All right, so we're doing another one of these Chapman's Iliad sort of practice sessions. Basically, I want to do a audiobook rendition of Chapman's Iliad, which is from 400 years ago, and I can't find anybody who's done an audiobook version of it. And I would like to hear it as an audiobook, and I'd also like to hear it done as an audiobook well, which is not always a given with Iliad audiobooks. Because a lot of the ones that are kind of out of like copyright or whatever are people do like AI versions of them and stuff, and they're not very well executed. So I would like to do, my own, and I am trying to take it pretty seriously and do some practice sessions for it to kind of get the rhythm of it. So Chapman's Iliad is, as I mentioned, it's very from a long time ago. It's from Shakespearean times, and it's written in, I think they call them 14ers, or it's like, I don't remember what the type of meter is that it's called, but you'll hear it as you go. It's rhyming verse, and it's probably pretty hard to parse. It's not for beginners. It's, you probably should have read the story a few times before you even are going to hope to understand what's going on at any given time. For anybody who's not familiar with a lot of modern, or rather older Iliad translations from like more than 100 years ago, this, like all ones from that time, uses the Roman names for the gods and characters. So Odysseus is called Ulysses, Zeus is called Jupiter or Jove. That's just the way it worked back then. I've mentioned it in other ones, but like, a lot of people nowadays complain about that, like as if it's some kind of like revisionism, but that's just the way that they did it at the time. There's no, you can't get angry about a thing like that. So what I'm doing here is to practice the get the flow of the story, and try to put it into a good, get like a feel for it. So I, usually when I do an audiobook, I will research every single pronunciation and make sure that they're all correct. And there's a lot of steps that I'm not doing here because, for example, it doesn't really matter right now if I get the right pronunciation because this is not going to appear in the actual audiobook. And that's not really the point. I'm trying to get the flow of the metrical scheme and the rhymes and stuff. So let's jump into it. I'll put the windscreen on here. I'm also not in my like full studio setup, so again, it doesn't matter because it's just for practicing. What I figured I would do is a battle scene, which we haven't done yet. So I obviously. Book 5 is a good one to do for that. I also haven't done an argument yet, which Chapman does the arguments in a different, the arguments meaning the sections that a lot of antiquated Iliad versions use, where it sort of summarizes what's going to happen in that book of the story. He uses a different rhyming scheme or a meter scheme for the arguments, which I'll give it a shot with these. Another thing that's probably good to do is for me to go back and check just before we start, to go and check another version episode that I've done, because I don't want I always, when I'm doing an audiobook, I always listen to the files of a previous chapter so that I make sure it doesn't drift. The narration doesn't drift into a different tone or something. You'd be surprised how easy it is for that to happen over, a 12 to 20 hour audiobook, depending on how long this one ends up. God like man, though your good name may color it. Called a court. Sensed, if unperformed vows, he blames in on us. All right, so I don't think you could hear it there because I don't think it's playing the computer audio, but I was just listening to a previous episode. So all right, let's do a few minutes of Chapman's Iliad, Book 5. Book 5. Argument. King Diomed, by Pallas' spirit inspired, with will and power is for his acts admired. Mere men and men derived from deities, and deities themselves he terrifies, as wounds to terrors. His inflamed lance draws blood from Mars and Venus. In a trance he casts Aeneas with a weighty stone. Apollo quickens him and gets him gone. Mars is recured by Paean, but by Jove rebuked for authoring breach of human love. Another argument. In Epsilon heaven's blood is shed by sacred rage of Diomed. I'm going to make this bigger because I can't really see it that well. Does that still fit inside? I think that fits on the screen that I'm showing. Good. I'll make it one smaller. Then Pallas breathed in Tydeus' son, to render whom supreme to all the Greeks, at all his parts, she cast a hotter beam. On his high... Oh, okay. Let's do that again. Then Pallas breathed in Tydeus' son, to render whom supreme to all the Greeks, at all his parts, she cast a hotter beam on his high mind, his body filled with much superior might, and made his complete armor cast a far more complete light. From his bright helm and shield did burn a most unwearied fire, like rich autumnus golden lamp, whose brightness men admire, past all the other host of stars, when, with his cheerful face, fresh washed in lofty ocean waves, he doth the skies enchase. To let whose glory lose no sight, still Pallas made him turn, where tumult most expressed his power, and where the fight did burn. An honest and a wealthy man inhabited in Troy, Dares, the priest of Mulciber, who 2 sons did enjoy, Idaeus and bold Phegeus, well seen in every fight. These, singled from their troops and horsed, assailed Minerva's knight, who ranged from fight to fight on foot, all hasting mutual charge, and now drawn near, first Phegeus threw a javelin swift and large, whose head the king's left shoulder took, but did no harm at all. Then rushed he out a lance at him that had no idle fall, but in his breast stuck 'twixt the paps and struck him from his horse. Which stern sight when Idaeus saw, distrustful of his force, to save his slaughtered brother's peril, it made him headlong leap from his fair chariot and leave all, yet had not scaped the heap of heavy funeral. If the god, great president of fire, had not in sudden clouds of smoke, and pity of his sire, to leave him utterly unaired, given safe pass to his feet. He gone, Tydeus sent the horse and chariot to the fleet. The Trojans, searing Dares' sons, one slain, the other fled, were strook amazed. The blue-eyed maid, to grace her Diomed, in giving free way to his power, made this so ruthful fact a fit advantage to remove the war god out of act, who raged so on the Ilian side. She griped his hand and said, griped, it's spelled griped, but it probably should be gripped. All right. On the Ilian side, she gripped his hand and said, Mars, Mars, thou ruiner of men, that in the dust hast laid so many cities, and with blood thy godhead dost disdain. Now shall we cease to show our breasts as passionate as men, and leave the mixture of our hands, resigning Jove his right, as rector of the gods, to give the glory of the fight where he affecteth, lest he force what we should freely yield. Okay. So many cities with blood thy godhead does disdain. Now shall we cease to show our breasts as passionate as men, and leave the mixture of our hands, resigning Jove his right, as rector of the gods, to give the glory of the fight where he affecteth, lest he force what we should freely yield? He held it fit, and went with her from the tumultuous field, who set him in a nearby seat on broad Scamander's shore. He gone, all Troy was gone with him. The Greeks drave all before, and every leader slew a man. But first the king of men deserved the honor of his name, and left the slaughter then, deserved the honor of his name, and led the slaughter then, and slew a leader, one more huge than any man he led, great Odius, Duke of Halizons. Quite from his chariot's head he strook him with a lance to earth. At first he flight addressed. It took his forward turned back, and looked out of his breast. His huge trunk sounded, and his arms did echo the resound. Idomeneus to the death did noble Phaestus wound. Yeah, so, okay. Usually, so that character from Crete's name is typically spelled in a way that I pronounce it Idomeneus, but he is spelled it Idomeneus. So I guess I'll do that way for this one. Arms did echo the resound. Idomeneus to the death did noble Phaestus wound, the son of Maeon Boris, that from cloudy Turna came, who taking chariot took his wound, and tumbled with the same from his attempted seat. The lance through his right shoulder struck, and horrid darkness struck through him. The spoil his shoulders struck through him. The spoil his soldiers took. Atrides Menelaus slew, as he before him fled, Scamandrius, son of Strophius, that was a huntsman bred, a skillful huntsman, for his skill Diana's self did teach, and made him able with his dart infallibly to reach all sorts of subtlest savages, which many a woody hill bred for him, and he much preserved, and to all show his skill. Yet not the dart-delighting queen taught him to shun this dart, nor for all his hitting so far off the mastery of his art. His back received it, and he fell upon his breast withal, his body's ruin, and his arms so sounded in his fall, that his affrighted horse flew off, and left him like his life. Meriones slew Phericlus, whom she that ne'er was wife, yet goddess of good housewives, held in excellent respect. For, knowing all the witty things that grace an architect, and having power to give it all the cunning use of hand, Harmonides, his sire, built ships and made him understand, with all the practice it required, the frame of all that skill. He built Alexander's ships that authored all the ill of all the Trojans and his own, because he did not know the oracles advising Troy, for fear of overthrow, to meddle with no sea affair, but live by tilling land. This man Meriones surprised, and drave his deadly hand through his right hip. The lance's head ran through the region, about the bladder, underneath the in-muscles and the bone. He, sighing, bowed his knees to death, and sacrificed to earth. Pylades stayed Pedius' flight, Antenor's bastard birth, whom virtuous Theano his wife, to please her husband, kept, as tenderly as those she loved. Pylades near him stepped, and in the fountain of his nerves did drench his fervent lance, at his head's back part, and so far the sharp head did advance, it cleft the organ of his speech, and the iron cold as death he took betwixt his grinning teeth, and gave the air his breath. Eurypylus, the much-renowned and great Evaemon's son, divine Hypsenor slew, begot by stout Dolopion, and consecrate Scamander's priest he had a god's regard amongst the people. By stout Dolopion, and consecrate Scamander's priest, he had a god's regard amongst the people. His hard flight the Grecian followed hard, rushed in so close that with his sword he on his shoulder laid a blow that his arm's brawn cut off, nor there his vigor stayed, but drave down, and from off his wrist it hewed his holy hand, that gushed out blood, and down it dropped upon the blushing sand. Death with his purple fingers shut, and violent fate his eyes. Thus fought these, but distinguished well. Tydides so implies his fury that you could not know whose side had interest in his free labors, Greece or Troy, but as a flood increased by violent and sudden showers let down from the hills like hills. And then there's missing pages I noticed in this scan of the book. We're looking at the Iliad, a version of Chapman's Iliad that was published in, I want to say like 1910 or the 1800s, and I guess this scan is missing a couple pages. But whatever, it's just for practice anyway. So now we're back to the part when I think it's probably when Aeneas is telling Pandarus to shoot at Diomedes, because in the ensuing 2 pages that we missed, Diomedes is like on an absolute rampage. As it was just saying right there, there's a really interesting part in Christopher Logue's version of the Iliad where he's basically writing an original poem, but still it's still the story of the Iliad. But in his version, basically, Aphrodite curses Diomedes to not be able to distinguish friend from foe. And so he's literally just slaughtering everyone that he sees. And that's what Homer says, something like, you couldn't tell who he's fighting for, Greeks or Trojans, right here. He so implies his fury that you could not know whose side had interest in his free labors, Greece or Troy. But as a flood come down from the hills and it's like unstoppable, that's what Diomedes is like. So anyway, he's on a rampage. Aeneas and Pandarus are going to try and stop him. Lives that any that exceeds thyself, come, lift thy hands to Jove, and send an arrow at this man. If but a man he prove, that wins such godlike victories, and now affects our host with so much sorrow, since so much of our best blood is lost by his high valor, I have fear some god in him doth threat, incensed for want of sacrifice, the wrath of God is great. Lycaon's famous son replied, Great counsellor of Troy, this man, so excellent in arms, I think is Tydeus' joy. I know him by his fiery shield, by his bright 3-plumed casque, and by his horse. Nor can I say, or if some god doth mask in his appearance, or he be whom I name Tydeus' son, but without gods the things he does for certain are not done. Some great immortal that conveys his shoulders in a cloud goes by and puts by every dart at his bold breast bestowed, or lets it take with little hurt. For I myself let fly a shaft that shot him through his arms, but had his good gone by, yet which I gloriously affirmed had driven him down to hell. Some god is angry, and with me, for far hence where I dwell, my horse and chariots idle stand, with which some other way I might repair this shameful miss. 11 fair chariots stay in old Lycaon's court, new made, new trimmed to have been gone, curtained and harassed underfoot, 2 horse to every one, that eat white barley and black oats, and do no good at all. And these Lycaon, that well know how these affairs would fall, charged when I set down this design I should command with here, and gave me many lessons more, all which much better were than I took forth myself. The reason I laid down was but the sparing of my horse, since in a sieged town I thought our horse meat would be scant, when they were used to have their manger full. So I left them, and like a lackey slave, and came to Ilion, confident in nothing but my bow, that nothing profits me. 2 shafts I vainly did bestow at 2 great princes, but of both my arrows neither slew, nor this, nor Atreus' younger son, a little blood I drew, that served but to incense them more. In an unhappy star, I therefore from my armory have drawn these tools of war. That day, when for great Hector's sake to amiable Troy I came to lead the Trojan bands. But if I ever joy in safe return my country's sight, my life, in safe return my country's sight, my wife's, my lofty towers, let any stranger take this head, if to the fiery powers this bow, these shafts in pieces burst, by these hands not be thrown. Idle companions that they are to me and my renown. Aeneas said, Use no such words, for any other way than this they shall not now be used. We first will both assay this man with horse and chariot. Come then, ascend to me, that thou may tryest our Trojan horse, and skilled in field they be. And in pursuing those that fly, or flying being pursued, how excellent they are of foot. And these, if Jove conclude the scape of Tydeus again, and grace him with our flight, shall serve to bring us safely off. Come, I'll be first, shall fight. Take thou these fair reins and this scourge, or, if thou wilt, fight thou, and leave the horse's care to me. He answered, I will now descend to fight. Keep thou the reins, and guide thyself the horse, who, with their wonted manger, will better wield the force of the impulsive chariot, if we be driven to fly, than with a stranger, under whom they'll be much more shy. And fearing my voice, wishing thine grow resty, nor go on to bear us off, but leave us engaged for mighty Tydeus' son, themselves and us. Then be thy part, thy one-hoofed horse's guide. I'll make the fight, and with a dart receive his utmost pride. Utmost pride. With this the gorgeous chariot both thus prepared ascend, and make full way at Diomed, which noted by his friend. Mine own most loved mind, said he, 2 mighty men of war I see come with a purposed charge. One's he that hits so far with bow and shaft, Lycaon's son, the other fames the brood of great Anchises, and the queen that rules in amorous blood. Aeneas, excellent in arms, come up and use your steeds, and look not war so in the face, lest that desire that feeds thy great mind be the bane of it. Thus, this did with anger sting the blood of Diomed, to see his friend that chid the king before the fight, then preferred his abless and abeless? I don't know. And then preferred his abeless and his mind to all the ancestors in fight now come so far behind. Whom thus he answered, Urge no flight, you cannot please me so, nor make a good please me so. Nor is it honest in my mind to fear a coming foe, or make a flight good, though with fight. My powers are not or make a flight good, though with fight. My powers are yet entire, and scorn the help tire of a horse. I will not blow the fire of their hot valours with my flight, but cast upon the blaze this body borne upon my knees. I entertain amaze. Minerva will not see that shame, and since they have begun, they shall not both elect their ends, and he that scapes shall run, or stay and take the other's fate. And this I leave for thee. If, amply wise Athenia, give both their lives to me, rein our horse to their chariot hard, and have a special heed to seize upon Aeneas' steeds, that we may charge their breed, and make a Grecian race of them, that have been long of Troy. For these are the breed of those brave beasts which, for the lovely boy that waits now on the cup of Jove, that far-seeing god, gave Tros the king in recompense, the best that ever trod the sounding centre, underneath the morning and the sun. And Chryses stole the breed of them, for where their sires did run, he closely put his mares to them, and never made it known to him that heir'd them, who was then King Laomedon. 6 horses had he of that race, of which himself kept 4, and gave the other 2 his son, and these are they that scour the field that so bravely towards us, expert in charge and flight. If these we have the power to take, our prize is exquisite, and our renown will far exceed. While these were talking thus, the fired horse brought the assailants near, and thus spake Pandarus. Most suffering-minded Tydeus' son, that hast of war the art, my shaft that struck thee slew thee not, I now will prove a dart. This said, he shook, and then he threw a lance aloft and large, that in Tydides' curate stuck, quite driving through his targe. Then brayed he out so wild a voice, that all the field might hear. Now I have reached thy root of life, and by thy death shall bear our praises chief prize from the field. Tydides, undismayed, replied, Thou errest, I am not touched, but more charge will be laid to both your lives before you part. At last the life of one shall satiate the throat of Mars. This said, his lance was gone. Minerva led it to his face, which at his eye ran in, and as he stooped, struck through his jaws, his tongue's root, and his chin. Down from the chariot he fell, his gay arms shined and wrung. The swift horse trembled, and his soul forever charmed his tongue. All right. Not so bad. I'll take the thing off here. I kind of stumbled during Pandarus's speech, at least Pandarus and Aeneas' speeches. I was starting to kind of lose the thread of the rhythm. There's a lot of parts in this section, especially during these dialogue parts, where Chapman is not ending the, like for example here, been long of Troy, and the sentence ends at the end of the line. But a lot of these, like, for the lovely boy that waits now on the cup of Jove, like the sentence is continuing through to the next line. And I've been working on this throughout these practice ones to kind of try and get a good rhythm for doing those parts without making them seem like I'm trying too hard to hit every single beat, which I think totally ruins the drama of the story. And turning it into something that doesn't even use the rhymes at all, which I also don't want to do. I think I've landed at a pretty good spot between those, but for Aeneas and Pandarus's speeches, I would say it was less good. But yeah, it was interesting to do a battle scene with this translation, which, the translation, because of how like Shakespearean it is, you kind of expect it, or it's easy to do it in like very lofty kind of like sort of like I'm reciting poetry type of thing, but the Iliad is such a hot-blooded story. It's probably the most, raw and like brutal story that has probably ever been written, like in terms of like the way that it not only is the violence insanely graphic, where Pandarus right then was killed by the spear coming in through his eyeball and cutting out his tongue at the root as it went past through his head, described in excruciating detail, but also the pathos of every single character that gets killed, that you immediately have a flashback to some moment that develops their character as that he's about to get his, head stoved in, or, some kind of horrible, grasping his guts on the ground or whatever. And so like, it's really important to me that Chapman's Iliad, yes, it's a nice poetry and it's really beautifully written, but I still want it to have that extremely bloodthirsty feel to it, which is why I've chosen the way that I've been narrating it. And I think it works pretty well. I've certainly never heard anybody do a rhyming verse translation, audiobook narration of the Iliad like this. But this is the way it occurs to me to do it. And I'm also interested to do this project just because I've read the Iliad so many times, and I feel that I'm very qualified to speak to, or to like infuse meaning behind all of the different things that are happening, because I know everything that's happening. If you've watched my other YouTube videos, I've literally recited it off the top of my head for a lot of this stuff in this story, with a blindfold on. And so it's kind of a thing that I know like the back of my hand. And so I feel like I'm able to infuse a lot of stuff that maybe other people who've only read it, once or 5 or 10 times can't necessarily lend to it. I don't know how many times I've read it at this point, but it's probably around 30 times that I've read the Iliad in all different, every major translation pretty much that exists. I've read, and I want to do something with, I want to put my stamp on it. So I'm interested to keep going with this. But yeah, I think that worked pretty well. If whenever this comes out, the actual audiobook of this comes out, then you can find it by searching for me on wherever audiobooks are sold, Audible, Apple Books, whatever, Spotify. The Voice of Nick is the name of the name I use as a narrator, same as the name of this YouTube channel. There's an interesting wrinkle that's happened in the last time I did an audiobook, which is the Frodo franchise. I just came out with an audiobook of it like a month ago, and a lot of audiobook platforms were pushing back because they thought I was AI, because apparently audiobook, sometimes you can put out an audiobook now that's done by an AI voice, and it'll be called like the voice of whatever. And so they thought that I was an AI voice, which I pointed them to my YouTube channel, where you can see 11,000 videos of me literally talking into the video. So they, the committees said like, okay, you're obviously not AI. But yeah, that was an interesting kind of moment where it's like, wow, I obviously made this channel way before AI was like a thing that could have this problem, and this is like a weird problem to have. But yeah, anyway, I'm pretty happy with how that turned out.